All right, today we are diving into something pretty fascinating, a prophesied 1,000-year reign of Christ right here on Earth. This is supposed to be a time of incredible peace and justice, unlike anything in history. So let's get into it and see what that world is actually described to be like. I mean, just think about that for a second. A world with no war, no sickness, a world where even nature itself is in complete harmony. It's a really powerful idea, right? And that's the core concept we're going to break down today, how exactly this 1,000-year peace is all supposed to unfold. So, what exactly is the millennium? Well, according to this theological framework, it's a literal 1,000-year era where Christ physically rules on earth. And this isn't just some spiritual metaphor, you know? It's described as a very real, tangible period of history that brings about a total global transformation. Okay, so how does an era like this even get started? The source material tells us that the entire world reorganizes itself around a single central location, a new heart for all of humanity. And that center is a physical temple in Jerusalem. It's described as way more than just a place to worship. Think of it as the administrative capital of the entire planet, the place where every nation goes for guidance, for law, for everything. So, with this new world order in place, what would daily life actually be like? Let's take a look at the radical changes to society and, get this, even the laws of nature itself during this time. This ancient prophecy is said to become a literal reality during the millennium. So it's not just a nice poetic idea about peace. It's a description of a world where the very tools and even the knowledge of how to wage war have become totally obsolete. Imagine that. The instruments of death are actually physically reforged into tools for life, for growing food and building things. This just perfectly captures the fundamental shift that's described, a complete pivot from global conflict to global cooperation and growth. The source material paints a picture of a life that sounds, well, almost utopian. We're talking about universal prosperity, the end of disease, a restored environment, and absolute safety for everyone. The core idea is that the world itself becomes a kind of classroom, with the knowledge of the Lord as the main subject. And this transformation goes way beyond just humanity. The texts describe a total reversal of the natural order as we know it. Predators and prey, think lions and lambs, are said to live together peacefully. It says even a child could play safely right next to a cobra's den. Incredible! Human lifespans are also just dramatically extended. So much so that the text says if someone dies at 100 years old, they'd be considered a youth who died under a curse. That really puts our whole concept of a long life into a totally different perspective, doesn't it? Now, this brings up a really key question. Who exactly is living in this kingdom? The sources describe a pretty unique social structure, with two very different groups of people living side by side. Let's break that down. Okay, so on one side, you've got the resurrected saints. They have immortal, glorified bodies, and they actually help Christ run his government. But on the other side, you have mortal humans, people who survived the previous era or were born during the millennium. They live natural lives, they have families, they repopulate the earth. So here's the crucial distinction. One group rules and the other is ruled, but all under a perfectly just system. And part of this just rule involves a very specific required act of worship. The text describes an annual pilgrimage to Jerusalem that is mandatory for all the mortal nations. This act serves as a yearly acknowledgement of Christ's global authority, and it becomes a central part of cultural and spiritual life all over the world. But this incredible era of peace, it doesn't last forever. According to the text, the 1,000 years don't just fade away. No, they end with a dramatic final conflict. So get this. After 1,000 years of perfect peace, Satan is released from his prison. And, unbelievably, he quickly manages to deceive a huge number of people born during this perfect era, into one last rebellion. They march on Jerusalem, but the uprising is just crushed, instantly, by fire from heaven. And that's when Satan faces his final, permanent judgment. This final, failed rebellion then sets the stage for the end of history as we know it. The source describes one last judgment, and then the creation of an entirely new reality. So after Satan's final defeat, there's a second resurrection, and this one is very different from the first. According to the text, This includes every single unsaved person from all of human history. They're all brought before God for a final, all-encompassing judgment at what's called the Great White Throne. At this judgment, two sets of records are opened up. First, the books of deeds, which contain a perfect record of every person's life, showing everything they ever did. But the decisive record is the book of life. That's the registry of the saved. With their names not found in that book, they're judged based on their deeds and ultimately cast into the lake of fire. And with that final judgment complete, the current universe, the old heaven and the old earth, is completely dissolved, gone. In its place, God creates a new heaven and a new earth, an eternal reality that's described as being totally free from sin, from sorrow, and from death, forever. And this leaves us with a final, really thought-provoking question that this material raises. Even after living for generations in a perfect world, under a perfect ruler, a huge part of humanity is still willing to rebel. It suggests that within this framework, the core problem of human nature isn't really the environment we're in. It's something in the heart. And that is definitely something to think about.